Okay, so this video is gonna have 3 main sections. The first, I'm just gonna talk over what is gesture, what is construction, the differences between the two. And then I'm gonna go into drawing the same pose in terms of gesture, and then drawing the same pose in terms of construction. And then I'm gonna do a mix of both. So let's get started. I also have Mambo here, this little guy Mambo. So gesture and construction, what are the two of them? Gesture, we'll talk about first, because this is one of the first things that people learn when they're like, oh, I want to get into drawing people or something like that. They want to learn gesture. So what is gesture? Gesture is going to be mainly about the motion slash flow. We want to draw the figure, keeping in mind the motion of the figure, the flow of energy within the body, but also it's very abstract. If you're focusing on 100% gesture, it's going to be super abstract. And I should make the point now that gesture and construction, it's not like you're doing one or the other. It's kind of a spectrum. Like this, your figure drawings can fall anywhere between this line. So we have the motion, the flow, the abstract, and also like the concept. So what does all of this mean? The whole thing about gesture all boils down to the type of line. So your line shouldn't be hairy like that, or squiggly like this. Your lines, you want to think of nice, smooth, swerving lines that go from thin to thick to thin, that sort of build out as they hit the curve. Imagine ice skating, or imagine driving a car. When you need to hit a corner, you end up feeling all of this force being pushed down this way, right? And if you guys know Mike Matessi's force method, this is the same idea. So the gesture line needs to keep this into account. When you're doing gesture drawings and you're really focusing on gesture, these are the kinds of lines you're doing. And also just these, think of it like when I was studying with Mike Matessi, a lot of it was filling up a page with these skating lines in order to help build the muscle memory and develop your hand and learn to draw with your arm, with your shoulder, with your wrist all together, and smooth everything out like this. The other thing about it, so after line, once you have the good gesture line in, you also want to think of gestural shapes. So you'll see me do this, and the idea of this shape is that it's asymmetrical. So if I draw a line like here, this is not symmetrical with right here. And also there's a bounce between both sides like this. So if you were to flow water, if this was a river and water would be pouring in, I guess I'll use blue, it'll sort of hit this bank and flow the other way like that, right? If I were to hit the mambo and then I'll have it flow through, there needs to be a good balance of going back and forth, right? Going up and down and going back and forth. So there needs to be this directional movement. What this sort of represents, this flowing water, is how the eyes move. That's like a big thing. When you see good gesture drawings, there's a clear starting point or a clear focal point for your eyes, and then they can easily and very smoothly go from one area to the other. If I were to just follow this line, my eyes would just flow from here. It reaches the end, it just naturally, boom, it just jumps over. Boom, it jumps over. Like that. So it's directing the eye, it's the motion, it's very abstract, and I'll talk about that once I get into like an actual figure. And you're sort of designing out the shape. So that's the last part that I want to mention, that is very design heavy. A lot of gesture, there's templates. So there's certain ways and common techniques or common methods of drawing certain anatomical body parts with gesture. And that's how people are able to do gesture drawings in 30 seconds or something. The other thing about gesture, and this is the last thing that I'll cover because this is a gesture video, but along with these lines, so you want to have these good flowing lines that go from thin to thick to thin, that when you hit the curve they get thicker, and then when you hit straights they go thinner. These would be called CSI lines. C curves, S curves, and straights, the CSI lines. You also want to have good shapes. So the shapes to avoid, do not use these shapes. These are the bad shapes, is the bubble, the opposite of that, and the straights. These are very symmetrical shapes, so we want to avoid having arms that look like Michelin Man. You want to have good shapes that combine a curve with a straight, so that there's asymmetry and there's a clear direction of energy, as well as either a curve with maybe a lesser curve, so that there's still energy going. Or you can even do curve into a second curve like this, but make sure they're offset so that way you can have a straight like this. So these are the kinds of shapes that you kind of want to have in the back of your mind and have in your sort of muscle memory. And that's kind of what the point of these like 30-second, 1 minute, 5-minute gesture drawings are for, is to, once you've learned all of this and you know like the templates of the body and how to like navigate the body and see the flow within the body, the abstract, then it's just the 30-second timer, the 1 minute timer, is to get a lot of repetition in, so that way you can get used to seeing a bunch of different bodies in different poses, and also quickly drawing out and identifying what sort of design shape you want to put in. Now, what is construction then? Construction is a lot more, is almost the opposite. Concrete, primitives, it focuses a lot more on perspective, corners, and angles. So what I mean by all of this, construction is basically when you see people draw out figures with boxes, with cylinders in different angles, putting them in different perspectives. There isn't too much about construction because I think it's pretty straightforward. It's just, you just need to know your 1-point, 2-point perspectives. If you know 1-point perspective, the horizontal and the vertical axes is completely parallel, while only the z-axis, the lines that are going away from you, away from the viewer, are in perspective. And then once you get good enough at drawing boxes and stuff in all of these different like very rigid angles, then you can have fun and experiment with more, free form boxes without a horizon line, without any kind of angles. Yeah, anyway. So construction, gesture, cylinders, boxes versus the flowing lines like this. All of this, though, you want to consider for both of them. They all have to do with proportion and balance of the figure. I'll see some people will think that like gesture drawing, I'm just focusing on the flow, I don't care about proportions. I personally don't like that train of thinking, because then you're just, you're not training your proportions and you're purposefully learning bad muscle memory and you're getting worse proportions. And it's, to me, it kind of sounds like an excuse, but this is what these two are about. So now let's actually go through a figure and talk about gesture versus construction for both of them. So I have a figure drawing right here. I'm gonna put them nice and big. I'm gonna move the mambo over this way. All right, so if we're gonna be focusing on gesture, like a pure gesture, if it's the spectrum from G, which is gesture, to C, which is construction, we're gonna be drawing it like right here. So how do we do a gesture from all the way over there? Just a pure gesture. The first few things that we want to keep track of is analysis. So if we're looking at this as pure gesture, remember the lines, remember the flow of everything. And we're first seeing this really strong flow right here. And then it kind of flows into the leg like this. You can also break it down even smaller by going into the torso first. And this is where you'll start to see two different types of torsos. You have the C torso versus the S torso. And in this case, you can make the argument for both. On first glance, you might say that this is a C torso because you have a big curve here and then two straights here, right? You might think this is a C torso, and you may be right. But I think in my case, this can also be an S torso because you have one big curve here and you have a big curve here, and it kind of creates the S shape like this. And you have a straight here and then a straight here. So you can see how like I'm not really caring about like too much anatomically correctness or anything like that. I'm just focusing on where are the main curves. And also you want to, if you're so new to gesture and you don't really get it, take a pose, move your body into the exact same pose, because then you can feel where the energy is, because this is another big part. In order to sort of see where you want to design and put these curves, you want to also imagine where is this person pushing and exerting force. Because this arm is falling back and because of this curve here, they are exuding force here, and they are also pushing force out here. They're pushing force out this way. It's also, you have to also imagine gravity just being a constant force being pushed down on them, but I'm not going to get into that. So that's why I'm putting a lot of energy in here. You can see if we're talking about the flow, we have the flow being pushed over here, and then it flows across and it's getting pushed right here. All of that talk, all of that analysis, and that's just the torso. There's this whole other flow going on too, once we move on to the legs. And if you're focusing purely on gesture, head last, arms don't even consider. Torso and legs are your main parts that you want to focus on. So let's move on to the legs next. So we have this shape already, this bean shape right here, right? A very gestural shape. Now we can move into the legs. So when you're doing all of this fancy stuff, how can I get from one area to the next without having to like give me hard angles? So we're gonna flow here, we're gonna flow across, but for this leg, let's handle this leg first. Why am I doing this leg first? This leg is the weight bearing leg. All of the weight is being pushed down onto this one. The center of gravity would be like around here. It's all leaning on this leg, while this leg is mainly for balance, so this is less important than this one. So we're gonna go over this leg first. First things first, if we're just looking at the edges and we know about the curves and we want to pair it with straights, immediately, if your eyes are trained well enough, you see the curve here, and you'll see a straight right here. We're gonna start, this is getting into leg templates. So once you have these memorized, and once you've trained your eyes to be able to see them on like a living figure, on a photograph of a person or real life, then you'll know that for the front view, this leg is in the front view. The template is outside, inside, outside. Outside of the thigh, inside of the knee, the curves, down to the outside of the calf. Right, outside of the leg, inside of the leg. So we're seeing the curves here. It's very abstract too. If we take this out, this doesn't really look like a leg or anything. This is basically just breaking down and analyzing how is the energy being flowed, how is all of this stuff flowing into each other. And of course on the other side we'll put straights. So we have a straight right here, a straight right here. And I'm ignoring all of this anatomy, all of these like little bumps and stuff. Who cares? Straight, straight, straight. Boom. Once we get to the leg, this is where some of like anatomy will have to sort of come into play. We have the medial malleolus, I think, and then there's the lateral malleolus that is going out into the foot. But if you're doing gesture drawings, you can just do something like a square for the foot, right? You don't have to worry about it. This is the most important part. And then, so if we put in the orange for the flow, we have the flow flowing in. You can go flow, 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 and then it flows into the thigh. Outside thigh, inside of the knee, outside of the calf, like that. And if we get our assistant Mambo over here, you can see how if they were to run down, boom, flow, 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 flow. There's a zigzag pattern with everything. So that's the other part about gesture, is that you always want to see, you want to be like a pinball machine, or you want your eyes to be like a pinball, where you want to be bouncing between both sides of the body. You want the curves to be bouncing back and forth. It's like, okay, yeah, I get the idea of this energetic line and stuff. Cool. And I want to put curves and straights together. Cool, I get it. I'm going to put a curve here. Oh, and I see another curve. I'm going to put a curve here, and I'm going to put a straight and then straight. The issue with this is that, one, you kind of have a hard angle right here, but two, if you're imagining the energy, you're flowing down, and then there's nothing to really catch you. You're sort of just, and then there's an immediate break in the energy. If water were to hit this area, you should think of it like it should be bulging out. These aren't, tungsten rigid walls. So this is why it's kind of tricky with this. You don't want to that's why you want to have the idea of bouncing here, and then you want to bounce back this way and then bounce back this way where you see it here. But in this case, how should we solve it? Now that we're on this foot, what should we do? This is not really a front angle, and if you follow the anatomy too, you see that there is a curve here and there is a curve here. There's a smaller curve here, there's a smaller curve here. How can we, solve this problem of going back and forth? Well, you could say that you can go this way, and there's a little curve here, so maybe you can do like a back of the calf into here, right? Okay, I'm kind of seeing this curve, I'm seeing this analysis. It can work, but to me, this isn't how I would do it because I feel like it's a little bit weak because you have this bigger curve right here. So the other point about gesture to keep in mind is we wanted to describe something in as few of lines as possible. If I can describe this leg in one line, that should be the best solution rather than putting in a bunch of random lines like that, right? So if I can go and capture this whole curve in one line like this, that can be a lot more successful. And then it goes into the second curve right here. Boom. And then here you can kind of just simplify it like this and then put a second curve like that. This is just capturing the anatomy to making sure it looks like a foot, and this can work because this area here is so simple that this side here can afford to be a little bit more complex. It's the idea of balance. So if one side is very, very simple, then this side can be a lot more complex, and that shape is a better designed shape than having both sides be super simple, or if both sides are super complex. So once you have all of this, right, and you're say you're doing an actual gesture drawing and you're doing this and you get to the arms is going to be this exact same idea, right? You're going to try to find the flow going around, right? The flow going up and down. Here there's like a stronger curve, kind of like right here into the fist, so I would do something like this. Here the deltoid curve down to the tricep curve and then all the way up, so you have the curves going like this, right? And then for the head, boom, that's the head. This would be an example of super on the gesture side, very abstract, right? If we think back to what I've mentioned before, it's focusing on motion flow, it's focusing on the abstract, it's not really describing much. You can kind of tell it's still a person, but it's focusing on the concept and also the design of the body rather than trying to capture so much likeness. And then in real time, if I were to just put out this gesture, right, I'll probably go like find the curve here, go across, right, boom, slow it down here, grab the leg outside, inside, outside, close off the shapes a little bit, drawing big, right? So I'm kind of drawing too big, that's fine. And then boom, this leg goes down, touch the ground, right? And then we have the other side of the body, boom, arm, curve over, arm, head. And this would be in like 30 seconds, right? Boom, boom, boom. And then if you had more time, you can clean it up and try to design it a little bit better, but yeah, no, boom. So this is gonna be super gestural side. Now let's look at the same pose, but more on the concrete. So now let's look at concrete. So concrete we talked about is boxes and cylinders. How do boxes and cylinders apply in here? And spheres too. Don't forget and spheres. But for boxes and cylinders, you want to capture the perspective. So if this is going to be the box, it's going to be very, very rigid. This will also be a box. Trying to see the angle. I'm going to struggle a little bit with this because my instinct is to add more gesture to it, like right away. But I'm going to try to avoid that and just focus and sort of isolate construction, which I also recommend that you do if you're a bit newer and you're like, these things are a bit getting stuck. I would just trace over, because that's what I did a lot, or I traced over a lot of photographs, just trying to build out the construction. And even though that, you're tracing and you may not be fully developing your hand-eye coordination to draw, you're still getting a little bit of muscle memory, but you're also you're training your eyes to see. So that way, once you look at all of this, you'll be like, oh, okay, I can see the primitive shapes in here, which sometimes you won't be able to see. So this would be more on construction, this idea here, where you're just using primitive shapes. Very, very rigid, very, very blocky. But the idea is to get good at both, so that way you can blend both of them. So let's go a little bit in depth just so that I'm not just favoring gesture so much. We have the rib cage can be a box. The rib cage can also be an egg shape. I would even put it lower, like this and bigger. The pelvis, I like using more of a diaper shape, like this. And then I like using spheres here because they allow me to put the leg cylinders however I want. That. Think of it like an action figure. And then you can do spheres if it's easier, or you can also try to do boxes for the knees to show the perspective. And then it goes into, see, I'm trying to add more gesture to it right now, but I'm gonna try to avoid that for a little bit longer. Boom, boom. With construction too, this is where anatomy should come in. Learn anatomy like right away. There's no point in saving anatomy for later. Just learn anatomy right now if you want to be able to draw people. So then the arms would also just be cylinders, and then the hands you can just do like boxes. So the whole thing is that you want to try to train your eyes to see the planes or the main planes rather than the small ones, and just see where the corners of the body are. So that's the other part too, corners. So you can see where this face is. It's like that, and then cylinder for the neck, right? A little bit more detailed to it. So that's the comparison between the two, and there's different ways of sort of exploring and building out the body with these two. So you have gesture here, you have the gesture, and then you have the construction. Now we have gesture, we have construction, these two sort of, the yin and yang, all of that kind of stuff. The real magic will happen when you start combining the two, gesture and construction. And that's when you can start getting cool shapes like this, and then maybe you can turn it into, you can start getting more and more complex with the shapes like this. Put an angle on it, right? Give me an angle like this. So this is mixing in some construction, some gesture. You see that I have the curve with the straight. I have a straight here with like a smaller curve here. This is sort of applying both of these. So now let's start combining. I have the pose right here. And like always, we're gonna start off with tracing so that we can talk about it, we can analyze it. I also suggest you trace it too, that way you don't have to worry so much about finding the right proportions. You can at least just focus on analyzing the concepts, or memorizing and practicing the concepts you've learned. I'm gonna go over and just go through a tracing of this and talk about how much gesture, how much construction. So first things first, you can find the angle of the shoulders. And then you can find the angle of the hips right here, bottom of the hips. You can see great trochanter here, great trochanter there. Boom. Okay, we have these. And we can kind of see that there's this curve happening right here. How can we design the torso? I'm gonna go with gesture first because I'm seeing these curves here. Now you can do like a big C-curve torso, but then you're sort of omitting a bunch of details in here. You're omitting details, but you're also not considering her movement. So bro is moving, pushing this way and also pushing this way. So I want to capture that in the torso, which means I'm going to do two curves instead of one. So this is going to be an S torso. Curve it out here, and then curve it out here. And then here, we can just simplify straight, straight. Okay, that's gesture. Now let's add some construction to it. Let's add some rigidity, some rigidness to this pose. I'm gonna start by throwing in a little bit of an egg shape here for the torso. Maybe even cut out the bottom part of it. And then, good thing there's a like underwear waistband right here, so I can put out the outline of the pelvis. And then I can start adding in a little bit more structure. There's a corner here. There's also, if I erase this, there's a corner right here. So I'm going to knock it back a little bit, erase part of it, curve, add the corner in, boom. Okay, so we're seeing a little bit of stuff right here. This is how I do construction. My pelvis construction is like this. I would do the underwear, and then I do two balls, and then I put in the legs like this. So I'm gonna do that for my construction of the pelvis. So I can see right here, and then I can easily just slide in the ball very slightly, slide in the ball, boom. Now we're on to the legs. So we have the main gesture here, we have it flowing this way, right, boom, the flows, right? Mambo can fly out this way. Let's do this long leg first because I'm gonna do something different here and I'll talk about it later. But this leg too is gonna be the same thing, outside, inside, outside. So I'm gonna go with a big outside right here, boom. Inside we don't really see, but I can still draw it in just so I get the flow of it, the feeling of it. And then I go back to outside like this. So right now it's very, very gestural. Now that I have this gesture in, and I can put in the straights, obviously, I can now start adding in wrapping lines, contour lines to help build out the 3D form. So we have something like this, and then we have something like this for the knee, and then we have this knee right here. So for this knee, I'm just gonna give me 2 edges of the knee like this, and I'm gonna call it a day right here. And then here, I'm gonna give a curve here, a straight, and another straight, like that. Okay, right leg, done. You can also do an outside, inside, outside. Like outside, inside, like this. Sure. But I'm gonna actually lead this with construction. So when do I use gesture? When do I use construction? The answer to that is like, I don't know, depending on your feeling. You know, there's no like clear-cut answer to it when you should use construction, when you should use gesture. But one area where construction will help, the strengths of construction is perspective. And if you have a little bit of foreshortening here, there's a perspective to this knee and there's a bend to it, we can start with construction. So I'm gonna start with a cylinder right here, wrapping around the full form. We're gonna do a cylinder here, and then this leg is pointing downward, so we're seeing the top of the cylinder here going down like this. And then we have the foot. Now that we have these cylinders here, we can now start adding a little bit of gesture to these cylinders. So we can have a little bit of gesture on this side of the cylinder. We can do the cylinder and then we can add a little bit and deform the cylinder a little bit and also add in the gesture of the outside, inside, outside to the cylinder. And then we can do like a little bump here if you want to. When you get to the knee, you can start adding in some boxes for the knee, bringing in some more rigidity to the form, just so that you have the planes. This whole idea is the idea of being able to manipulate and go from a cylinder to a rigid form. So you might see this shape a lot for the wrist. Like if you're going to draw a wrist, the wrist is simplified into a square, but then you have the ridge muscles up here, which can be more simplified into a cylinder. Or another very common thing that you'll see is with the knee, you'll see like, or with the elbow, where it's like this, and then you have the hand like that. The elbow is also a square, is a cube or a box, and then everything around it is a cylinder. So you're sort of simplifying it like this, right? That. So that's this kind of idea. Front view is a little bit tough to sort of, you know, make look appealing or see it clearly, but I mean, that's the idea. Okay, let's duplicate this and slide it over. So we're starting to develop and incorporate both gesture and construction into it. Now let's look at the arms. The arms here, so we have, I think it's a lot of people already know this, right? You put spheres for the shoulders. You can maybe draw the clavicle if you want to. Don't worry so much for the head. If you're so stuck on it, just put a big circle here. Don't worry about that. And you're just basically treating the arms the same thing as the legs. There's a big curve in here, and then there's kind of like a for the inside of the elbow, and then curve out here. So you kind of do something like this: cylinder, wrapping lines, cylinder, wrapping lines, hand, doesn't matter, right? Because a lot of the main thing is just getting this torso in, but also getting the legs. Torso and the legs are the most important part. Everything else can just sort of fall into place, like with cylinders and stuff like that. So we have a combination. So this here would be the true combination of gesture and structure. So to go over all of this, we have one side being way more gesture, one side being way more construction, and in the middle would be like the balance in between. So here, right, you can see how the flow kind of flows out this way, curves, right, very abstract, and bouncing back and forth. You want to keep in mind of the pinball machine, where it kind of just think, right, and also nice fluid motions. And then for this side, you just want to make sure that you keep the rigidness of everything, find the angles, find the perspective of things, know that which side is going to be facing this way, and then where is the turning edge. So it's going to be like this and this. Keep that in mind. And then when you combine the two of them, you'll sort of keep the track of the gesture of everything, but also keep track of the form and the perspective of everything. The gesture and construction is a spectrum. Gesture is a lot more fluid and keeping emotions, and you can also you can add construction, add structure to gesture, or you can add gesture to structure. Do your drawings in phases if this is, relatively tricky or new to you. Do draw in different stages. So do like first do your gesture drawing pass, erase slightly, and then draw and add in structure to the gesture drawing. And then also make sure you add a little bit of gesture to your primitive shapes. So if you have the knees and stuff here, you can, keep in mind this flow that's right over here and tie it in to the knee or to this leg. So that way you have a little bit of gesture right here to your cylinder. But anyway, that's the idea.